brainwashed son into stalking. I want to tell you about my stalker story. It's quite scary and it shows how some people can be obsessed with you and the proportions it can get to. I used to live in a busy road not far from my city's train station. Me and my family moved there in 2002. I was almost 1 year old, so I pretty much lived there my whole life. There was a small park in my neighborhood where the kids would go to play. I never went there alone because my mother was really scared of someone taking me away. When I was 6, I made a friend, Taril, who lived across the street. He was a bit older and would always be with his siblings, so my mother trusted him for the first time and she let me go to the park without an adult. All the kids were playing when a man approached us. He was in his 30s and was with his son, and he asked if his son could play with us, and Taril said of course. We played hide and seek, and weirdly the man played with us. I hid behind a very big tree, and after a few seconds I hear, "Well, that's not the best spot to hide." I turned around and saw the man behind me. I just smiled, and he hid with me. The tree was a bit isolated, so my friends took a long time to find us. During this time, he talked to me. He asked what my name was, how old I was, and where I was from. He told me his name was Hamid, and that he was from Turkey, but he was born here. While he was talking, I saw my friend approaching, so I said, "Oh, he's going to find us." So Hamid grabbed me, held me in his arms, and put his hand over my mouth and whispered, "Don't make any noise, we need to win." My friend ended up finding us. I didn't think anything bad about what had just happened, just that Hamid was a bit too friendly. Back home, I didn't even told my mum. Hamid and his son would always play with us, and when my mom found out about it, she was reassured to know that an adult was looking after us. Hamid would always be around me, but nothing really serious ever happened. About 3 years later, Hamid divorced his wife, and she took their son back in Turkey with her, and Hamid stopped playing with us. Years went by, and I haven't seen Hamid for a while, like 3 or 4 years. I am now 14, and one day I see Hamid at the bus stop, and I wave at him, smiling, but he didn't see me. At the time I was shy, so I didn't do anything else and just kept walking. A few days later, I was walking with my mom when we saw him. This time he came to us and started talking to my mom, then turned to me and said a thing that pretty much every adult says. "Lord, I didn't even recognize you. You've changed so much. You're a woman now." But the way he said it was weird. I felt uncomfortable, and even my mom noticed it. We would often see each other at the bus stop. We would have a small conversation. He would ask me about school or about family, and soon enough, the questions would become more strange. "Do you have a boyfriend? Did you already have your period?" asks questions that should not be asked. I was so embarrassed that I didn't even say anything and just answered. It was my birthday, and as usual, I see him at the bus stop. I didn't know how he knew, but he wished me a happy birthday and said, "So you're 15 now, huh?" Which I replied, "Yes," and he kept on saying, "You know, when I was 15, I had sex for the first time. Did you already have sex?" I just looked at him, rolled my eyes, and went back home. I told my mom about it, and she told my dad. And then my dad and Hamid had a quite violent fight. After this, my dad forbade me to talk to him ever again, which was quite logic. A few months later, a summer morning at about 6 a.m., I went running. I ran about 30 minutes. I was not in the city anymore, but in the countryside. I stopped to a fountain to drink because my bottle was empty, and when I heard footsteps behind me and felt that a person had stopped walking and was standing behind me, I was still drinking, and all of a sudden I felt someone scrub against me. I was bending to drink, so I immediately stood up and realized it was Hamid. I tried to go, but he grabbed me, and I tried to scream, but he put his hand on my mouth, just as he did behind the tree when I was 6. Thankfully, a guy saw what he did and came to help. Hamid ran away, and that guy took me back home. I told my family everything, and my dad went back to Hamid's house, but didn't find him, so this time he called the police. The police didn't find him either, and believed he had fled back to Turkey. I thought Hamid was once and for all out of my life now, that the police knew about his acts. For 3 months, everything went well, until one day we received a letter from Un loco enamorado de ti. It was written in Spanish and said things like, "Un día serás mía, y por siempre tu papi yo sería," and how he couldn't live without me, that he saw me growing up and becoming a woman. Crazy things like this. We would receive 1 or 2 letters every week, so my family decided to move and change the neighborhood. We looked for many apartments, but they were very expensive, and we didn't have enough money to afford them. And this went on until February the next year. I was 16, and one day a young man came to our house. He was slightly older than me. He was very well dressed and very handsome. He had black hair, a beard, and he had the most charming smile I have ever seen. He asked if my parents were home, and I said they weren't, that they would be back in an hour, so he said that he would come back at 5 p.m. As he said, at 5 p.m. he was back at my house, and he told my parents that he worked for an agency who rent cheap apartments, and that he heard from our neighbors that we wanted to move out. He then showed us a nice apartment, and 2 weeks later we moved in. 2 days after that, when I was alone, the handsome guy knocked on my door, and I told him my parents weren't home, but he said that he was here for me. He said I was beautiful and that we were almost the same age, and that he wanted to get to know me. After hesitating, I gave him my number. We talked for 2 months and ended up dating. Everything was really perfect with him. Me and Sam, my boyfriend, aka the really handsome guy, would see each other every day, sometimes even 2 or 3 times a day. I loved being with him, and we would never be bored being together. Sam is the perfect caring boyfriend. Nothing seemed weird about him. The only thing that I noted is that he would always take pictures of me. Always, even when we were not dating. I figured he really loved me and wanted to immortalize every moment we'd spent together. It was kind of cute. I really liked it. One day, I said to my mom that I was going out with my girlfriends, but instead I went to his house. It was the first time I went there. He lived alone in a very nice, yet very small apartment. We ate and watched a movie. It was a very nice afternoon. It was around 4 p.m. and Sam told me he was going to get a shower. I am very curious and also a bit mistrustful, so I started getting through Sam's things. I started by his wardrobe, then his drawers. I didn't find anything, and that's when I looked under the bed and I found a small green box. I took it and opened it. There were developed pictures he took of me. At that exact same moment, Sam got back in and said, "What are you doing, you little snitch?" I said, "I'm just looking through my boyfriend's stuff to get some evidence of infidelity." And I smiled, holding the pictures in my hand. "What are these?" I asked him. "You're so pretty, aren't you? Look at yourself. Damn, every time I miss you, I just look at those. I just love taking pictures. It's my passion." He sat near me, took the pictures, and filed it back in the box. I was even more satisfied with his answer. Everything he said made me fall even more in love with him. When it was time to go back home, I insisted to stay the night at his place. "I really don't want you to get in trouble with your parents," he said. I told him that I was going to call my mom and make her believe that I was staying at my cousin's house and that I was not going to get in trouble. I first called my cousin. She said she was going to call my mom herself and tell her I was sleeping at her house. Everything went as planned. We went to sleep at about 1 a.m. after watching so many episodes of Game of Thrones. The next morning he was not there. I was a bit scared. I took my phone and saw he had sent me a message. "I think I forgot to tell you I was working today, and I'll be back home at 12 p.m. with some Chinese food." It was about 10 a.m., so I had 2 hours before he'd come back. I looked under the bed, but this time the green box was missing. I thought it was really weird that the box wasn't where I found it, so I started looking for it. It was very well hidden because it took me an hour to find it, and it was under the kitchen sink. I took it and went to the bedroom. When I opened it, I saw there were new pictures that weren't there the night before. There were some pictures of me sleeping last night. I knew it was strange, but I thought he was just in love with me, and that it was probably normal. I texted my two best friends, sent them the pictures, and they both agreed it was strange, but that it was just his way to be in love with me. I decided to wait until he came home and talk to him about it. When he arrived, I greeted him with a petty face and the pictures. He said, "I'm sorry, I know you must find all this very strange, but I really love you, and I like every moment I spend with you. I hid them because I was scared you would think I'm a psycho. I just love you so much." It was so cute, I just jumped on him and gave him the biggest hug I thought he deserved. We continued dating, and it was all like in the movies, just a perfect relationship until he lost his job. That's when he started to get very nervous and angry. I was unsure of our love, but every time he was mean to me, he would be the nicest guy afterwards. One day, because of a picture I took that was provocative, he hit me for the first time. It didn't hurt that much physically, but emotionally it did. I ran into the bathroom and locked the door. He ran after me and asked me to open the door for at least 45 minutes, and he was apologizing. So I forgave him. As you may have anticipated, that was not the last time it happened, and I kept forgiving him because I was stupid. One day I was helping him clean the house, and I'm a little bit possessive, so I was looking into his pockets to see if I find any evidence of infidelity, but instead I found his ID card. I was shocked to see that his name was not the same as what I expected. His name was Mehmet Ali. I remembered I knew that name, but just couldn't remember when or where it was. We had a huge fight about it, and it didn't talk to him for a week. He would call me at any time, even at night, send me more than 50 messages a day. He was so into getting back with me that I once again forgave him. After a while, I had a huge fight with my parents about him. They didn't want me to be with the boy, so in the heated argument, my dad said, "You leave him or you leave this house." I was so furious that I took my stuff and of course I went to Sam Mehmet's house. Living with him was hell. He controlled every single move I made. He went through my phone at least 20 times a day and would always take pictures of me when I didn't expect it. When he finally got a new job, everything went back to how it used to be at the beginning. I was happy. One day, I was cleaning the house when I came across documents. I didn't pay attention to it at first, but then I saw a name that was quite familiar. Hamid. I took the documents, and it took me a minute to understand, but now it was clear to me. Mehmet Ali was the son of Hamid Ali. It was written on the documents. I felt nauseous, scared, and unsafe. It was too much for me. I wanted to go back to my parents' house. So I went to the bedroom, took a few clothes, and put them in my handbag, and I was ready to leave when I heard the keys unlocking the front door. I was scared, and I know it was obvious I wanted to leave, and knowing that he could get violent made me nervous and scared for my life. I hid my bag under the bed and tried as hard as I could to act normal for the rest of the day. The next morning, when he woke up and went to work, I got my things and ran away and went straight to my parents' house and told them everything. My parents obviously hit me with the "I told you he was no good." They immediately took me to the police and I told them the story. I was still in love with him and didn't really want to do this. They immediately arrested him and ended up arresting his father too. I asked the police not to tell me about any sentence Sam Mehmet would get. I didn't want to feel guilty, so to this day I don't know if he served a sentence in prison or just got a lesser sentence. The only thing I know is that a police officer handed me a letter from Mehmet, and that was what scared me the most. The letter was 6 pages long, so I can't get into all the details, but he apologized and told me his father taught him how to stalk me since he was a little boy playing with us. He had since childhood pictures of me hung up on his bedroom walls for so many years. His dad convinced him that one day he had to be with me and to marry me because it was God's will. What makes me the most sad is that at the end of the story, Sam Mehmet didn't fall in love with me, but was indoctrinated by his father. He ended the letter with, "I do sincerely love you for who you are, and I will love you forever, because this is the reality for me now." Tragic story of a girl in love. There was a girl in high school that really liked this guy. She was a bit, not to say a lot, shy. She could barely make friends, and no one actually liked her to that point that they would go out with her. She had serious self-esteem issues, and she compared herself to others every day. She cried in front of the mirror because she liked one of the most popular boys in the whole school. He had a plethora of friends, while she could count her friends with her fingers. Many girls wanted to go out with him too. It wasn't only his looks, but also his personality. He was outgoing, clever, dedicated, loving, charming, tender, and all the positive aspects she could ever imagine about a boy. She was the boy of her dreams. She didn't have any confidence. If she could barely make friends, she wasn't going to talk to her crush. She decided to stalk him instead. He didn't have Facebook, so she looked for his family on Google. She found who his parents, grandparents, and even about his long-lost aunt. She found his family's Facebook, and she saved his pictures on her computer. She had his picture as her wallpaper. She knew where he lived. She watched him for hours at school. She stalked his friends. She sent him weird anonymous gifts. She sent threatening notes to his girlfriends. She watched from the shadows, and nobody knew it was her. She continued stalking him for 3 years, until senior year came. The boy was tired of being stalked. He didn't know who that person was, but he wanted to stop her. One day, he set up a trap for her. She usually left him gifts on holidays, so he waited until the last day before Christmas break. He left a hidden camera in front of his locker, and then the girl appeared. She was there, in front of the camera. The boy planned to only talk to her about her abnormal behaviors and to make her stop. Yet one of his friends had helped him set everything up, and he began talking. When they returned, the boy came up to the girl, and the girl tried to run. He told her to stop. He tried to be kind with his words. The girl cried after he left. 1 week later, the whole school knew about her. They called her a creep, a slut, a retard, and she couldn't handle it. She overdosed herself with painkillers on her 18th birthday on March 17th. Her suicide note only had 6 words. He was everything I cared about. That girl was my older sister. I won't mention any names, but after that, the boy felt really strong guilt, even though it was the friend who began spreading rumors. The friend didn't even mention her after she committed suicide. I feel like what she did was selfish. She still had her family, and even though our father died when we were children, we still had our mom, and she was everything to us. I tried to talk her about stalking that boy multiple times, but she won't listen to me. She was obsessed with him, and I found her dead the next morning, March the 18th. I can't get that image out of my head. Even though it's been 10 years since that, I still can't forget that morning. The boy came to the funeral 1 week later. He brought her flowers. He said he was sorry, but I told him that he didn't have any fault in this. After that, I began seeing the boy. He became my boyfriend, and then 5 years later, my husband. And we have 2 children now.